pain's kind of like your check engine light. We've got like the smartest bio machine that anybody could ever own, right? You can't even purchase another one. That's the only one you get. Uh, so we've got one of these most intelligent bio machines out there. And a lot of times we silence pain, saying pain is bad or push through pain or something along those lines, which it is possible to do, but creates almost a disconnect from body and self. And a great phrase that said is, if you listen to your body when it whispers, you don't have to hear it when it screams.
Welcome back again to another episode of the Confident Mompreneur podcast, where we talk to real women from around the globe about real life difficulties and triumphs in momhood, business, relationships, health, and more. I'm your host, Kyrie, ready to give you real actionable advice to help you become the best, most confident version of you in all areas of your life. Let's get into it.
Hello.
Hi, friend. How are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
Good. I know. I'm doing good. I'm sad I missed you the last time you were in town. Wanted to get our movement on together. That would have been awesome. But
I know. I was like, I have to decide what I'm doing here because I was going elk hunting and I was like, I'm already going to be doing so much with that and like packing my stuff, but I can't handle more.
I totally understand. Just, throwing a little bit of guilt in there just because I missed seeing you.
Thanks. Appreciate
I
that.
see you today. You're welcome. Well, I'm Jennifer Wilkins, as you know, but maybe your listeners don't. I'm a movement specialist coach that kind of learned this through circus arts. So I started when I was 19 years old, kind of learning the different movement patterns of pole dancing is actually where I started. And I just absolutely loved it and wanted to learn more about it. And that led me into more of like aerial arts as far as the lyra and silks. I do silks currently in bed. And as far as alignment goes, that's my passion. I feel like if you understand like where your bone structure is supposed to be, your muscles can work much more efficiently that way. I'm sorry, I have somebody at my door right now.
No problem.
Sorry about that. I feel like once you have that movement down, once you have the alignment understanding, that sports easier to participate in without injury, which is, I think, kind of a reason why people don't do, sports or weightlifting or something along those lines, due to those little aches and pains that you. Favorite thing is showing or telling people what they can do in their just regular movements that they're already participating in that can better improve their experience in sports or gym work. And they don't need an extra, half hour, an hour per day. You're already doing it. You're already moving. So it's a good way to just implement those things into your life, and it just makes things better. So that's a little intro there, I guess.
That was a great intro. That was awesome. So I actually got to know Jen because every time I go and see my mom, we go and do her aerial silks class, and it's so much fun. She does such a great job of teaching and coaching, and I always have loved like the way that you bring real intention and thought into the movement and how you're doing those movements and making sure that you're not straining other muscles while you're trying to do it. And as like a weightlifter, that's also super important to me. And that body kind of awareness and consciousness has just been super beneficial to me. So how did you really get into this? And like, I know you are so knowledgeable when it comes to this stuff. What has that looked like for you as you like work to grow your knowledge and things around the body and all of the things with it?
A lot of it was self-driven learning, I guess you could say. There's not really a place you can go that I know about anyways. If you hear of any place, please let me know. I'd love to learn from them. But it's hard to just find a place that you can learn all those very minute, specific, detail-oriented positions for your basic movements, like a lunge or a squat. When I was younger, I was not gifted with movement. I was not super coordinated. I was very much like a baby giraffe, just very tall, very fast. I tried to dance. I tried to do sports. I was like the best bench warmer there ever was. So that that was really encouraging. Um, and I think that's what really sparked my interest in going, why is it that everybody else gets this, but I don't? And I'm doing the same things and I'm working just as hard. And I'm not that good, you know? So I just kind of found some certifications, National Academy of Sports Medicine. I have taken that twice. They have a corrective exercise movement program that I'm currently enrolled in. There's some great knowledge and things like that, but it still didn't give me those very specific answers that I was looking for. It got me closer. So what I ended up doing was, as I started learning these disciplines in circus arts or aerial arts, I was kind of injured a lot. And even through all of my training that I did before, shoulder injuries, bad knees, seems like everybody's got bad knees. I'm like, gosh, I don't think that's the problem. If everybody's got the same thing and we have a culture that does a lot of similar movement patterns, that's kind of where I started linking these things together, right? Studying movers in circus arts, and would look at these incredible contortionists or just people that had these skills, not only, in their 20s, but really who I was looking for is somebody that was really well vetted into the industry, somebody that had been doing it for 30, 40 years. They don't have injuries. They don't look like they're in pain, or, their aging process is very different than the
And they're
average
pushing
person.
their bodies to the limits on what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like way beyond that functional arena of what, you'd think functional movement would look like. And I just studied them so much and got so many answers from that. And then by getting those answers, it helped me dive into more things that interested me, like why we all have bad shoulders, or why is it that we all have these feet that are not functional, and bunions have become like this big thing that they've actually come out since and realized it's more the shoes that we're wearing versus genetics. And that these things can be reversed a lot of times, not all, but a lot of times without surgery or any, invasive procedures like that. And that's also what I've noticed within the circus arts realm is, things like scoliosis or bulging discs, herniated discs, those sorts of things. With work, with stability, with the correct training and alignment, pain can decrease significantly, if not be completely taken out of the picture, so you can have a functional moving life without that nagging pain constantly in the back of your mind. Sometimes in the forefront, that's all you can think about. So it's been pretty interesting to learn all these things. I've done this for about 20 years now, so that's 20 years of every day just diving into movers and watching what they do and how they move differently from somebody that sits sedentary, and why these different I don't even know if you want to call them ailments, but they bone shifting patterns, much like braces shift bones in your mouth. Your muscle tension will shift the bones in your body. And I have definitely had a lot of success in assisting people get back to functional movement just due to that. So thank you, Circus Arts, for providing all of that knowledge. And like I said, if you hear of a place that has just all of this laid out, I would love to know, because it would be so.
Well, I mean, the way that you teach it is so cool, and you have so much knowledge and, time in that industry. Maybe you need to make a training all about it and you be the one that puts it out there. So, just saying.
Well, I certainly appreciate that leeway, because I am working on my certification right now.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I love that you talk about like your time doing the circus arts, and I feel like when you think of circus art, for me at least, it's always like pushing your body like in these extreme ways. But you're talking about, like the things that you do and the knowledge that you've learned from like that kind of extreme movement can be brought into like our everyday lives so that like, even if you're like working an office job and you notice like, oh, there's a lot of pain in my neck, like how to kind of adjust that based on like some of the things that you've seen. So I have a few questions for you here, so you can choose to answer them however you want. But so how did you get into circus arts? Because I love that you're in that and you do so many cool things in it, and I love it. I think it's so cool. And B, for those that are in like sports and those types of things, how can we work on adjusting our bodies? Because I know for me growing up, like I was very heavy into gymnastics, and gymnastics is a hard sport on your body. And even now, as I'm lifting, I notice like some of those, injuries from gymnastics flaring back up again in my knees, especially, or my back and my ankles. So, how do we work on adjusting from those pain points that we see from maybe old injuries or sports that we used to do as we're trying to, be less sedentary and get into more active lifestyle?
Okay. Each one of those was pretty loaded, so let's see if I
I
can.
know. That's why I said you can answer those how you want.
Okay, let's start with what you can do every day to kind of improve and enhance your experience in your sports and weightlifting or whatever it is you're interested in. The first thing is thinking about how you sit is how you stand, is how you walk, is how you run. How we sit, think about hip tilt, which some of these may be a little foreign to people, but let me just expand your way of thinking about intentional movement here for a second. So hip tilt, understanding that the muscles in your hip area are the strongest muscles, largest muscles in the body, right? Your glutes. You've also got, going around the front, maybe some not as strong depending upon how you're using your hip tilt, hip flexors, right? Those are usually something that people will injure quite a bit, or pelvic floor, even thinking about that. How you sit, right? So 90 degrees, most people. Maybe internal femur rotation, so your knees are touching each other. Hip tilt in posterior versus anterior. So again, if you're not familiar with that.
You always talk about those when we're in class.
Yep.
I know
Yep.
those ones now.
And the interesting thing is, depending upon what you're doing and how, gravity is pulling on you, is going to be how you need to adjust those rotations of your structure so that the muscles are in a better position to load weight and disperse it evenly. So there's no joints that are taking more stress than another. So in my understanding of this, again, posterior hip tilt, back flexion, which is that rounded spine that everybody says is bad posture, which bad posture only really exists if there's pain. In my opinion, you have infinite postures and you should try to choose as many of them as you can all day long. So again, if we're sitting in one posture all day long, that's where you're going to get your pain from. So at home, sit at the edge of your chair versus using the back of the chair for support, because external support makes it easier for internal support. And in this case, we want to have more internal support so that our structure can be stronger, right? The more you work it, the more you use it, the better it gets. We choose comfort a lot. So when you lean back, it's maybe more comfortable for a little while until you start feeling those aches and pains, because that's your body's way of saying, please change positions. It's been longer than 2 minutes and I'm starting to get stressed. So every 2 minutes, change positions, sit to the edge of your chair, sit to the back of the chair, sit to the side of the chair, then switch to the other side of the chair. If you've got armrests, things of that sort, continuously moving and changing the tension of the muscle in your body will assist with a better overall structure when you stand up to move into your standing position, right? That would be your next thing to look at. So if you're standing with your hips posterior, back flexion, knees internally rotated, maybe even feet externally rotated is a lot of what I see, you're going to have a lot of that knee pain because all that pressure is going internal. right? You're going to have the lower back pain and the middle back pain because your hips are tucked and you're getting a huge amount of stress in the spine all day long. And then you're standing like that. And then you walk because you want to get healthier, but you're walking like that too, right? So then you're getting that pain from there as well. So fix the way that you're sitting, or change as much as possible. Change positions, change postures, thinking about all the bones in the body, not just the back, right? We think about pull the shoulders back, and that's going to be it. There's a little bit more to it than that. So like I said, in a very short, explained, lack of detailed way of saying how to improve, that would be the best way to do it, is to see how you're sitting and try and adjust there. So everything else can follow suit, and hopefully things will start making a change for the better. And if you have any additional questions, anybody, I'm available. So let me know.
Yeah, I love that you talk about, like, if you're doing too much in one way, like, you can cause tension. I definitely noticed that with my knees, actually, when I was in high school. You know, the muscles on the outside of my legs had gotten so strong from constant use, but the inside muscles of my legs were not so strong, and it was putting a lot of tension on my knees by, pulling one direction over the other, and that's where a lot of my pain came from. So when I put that consistency into strengthening my inner thighs, then I noticed that a lot of that pain went away.
Mhm. Yep. Pain's kind of like your check engine light. We've got like the smartest bio machine that anybody could ever own, right? You can't even purchase another one. It's the only one you get. Uh, so we've got one of these most intelligent bio machines out there. And a lot of times we silence pain, saying pain is bad, or push through pain, or something along those lines, which it is possible to do, but creates almost a disconnect from body and self, where people stop listening to what their body's saying and they start silencing it with, whether it's medication, which if it's needed, absolutely, that's something that we're very privileged to have. But I would recommend almost sitting with it and thinking about where it could be stemming from. And a great phrase that said is, if you listen to your body when it whispers, you don't have to hear it when it screams. Right. So again, going back to that check engine light, the whisper is that dull, very quiet, achy pain that starts in a joint, or in a muscle, and then moves towards more of like a pinch or a stabbing pain, right? To then that throbbing, kind of intense pain, to stabbing, blinding, can't think about anything else but that pain. Right. So that would be more of the screaming part that we try to avoid. Right. But those little whispers that you hear, the inside of your knee starts to ache just a little bit. Check what your knee is doing at that moment. See if it's internal. See if you can roll it external and silence that pain. And if you roll it externally and it silences instantly, you'll know that's what the problem was. It was trying to tell you to correct. Right. So that pain is a wonderful tool that oftentimes we forget to use, and we try to push it aside. So
Yeah, we do that a lot with ourselves. I feel like, we always talk about listening to your intuition, but it's hard when you're not connected to your mind and your body. Like, and our bodies absolutely tell us what they need. We just have to be open to understanding and hearing that and connected to those parts of us. In my so I just released my Confident Woman journal, which is like a daily journal practice.
Awesome.
And one of the actual prompts in the journal itself is the question, what does my body need from me today? And I had one of my friends come by the journal, and she was working through it, and she came and talked to me, and she does strongman lifting is what she does. She's like the strongest woman in Wyoming, all of these things. And she came over to me and was like, so that question, like, about what my body needs, that one was really hard for me because I've never actually sat and asked what my body needs from me. And she has been having a really hard time lately because she recently had to have surgery on both of her shoulders, and so much of her identity, I think, was wrapped up in being a strong woman and doing that, that now she's feeling very disconnected from her body and disappointed in it and those types of things. How can we work through that when our body like says, hey, I've had enough, and kind of shuts down, we have major injuries? Or I know for me, when I get to a point, my body just like is like gets me sick. I get sick, and it's like, okay, this is me telling you you need to rest. How do we work through those things?
I definitely can empathize because I have been injured quite a bit, as I had mentioned before. The first half of my career, the first 10 years, I was injured a lot. And I feel like sometimes, especially in these intense sports, it's pretty awesome to be able to do some of this extreme stuff, right? And it is really easy. It's like, yes, so awesome. It's really easy to get wrapped up into that identity of these are the things that I can do. This is who I am. Only to have it completely taken away from you. And your sense of value at that point, I feel, is more in the ego. So a lot of times, and especially now, I'll just see these moves. I just have to try that. I just got to get it. That's going to be the one that's going to just make the crowd go wild. I have a lot of those. I have a lot of other ones just like that. And so I think about risk versus reward, right? Is it worth the risk? Is this my ego that really wants to get this move? And will I just be the coolest aerialist that ever lived if I got this move? Probably not, Would the audience be wowed? Yeah, they will be, but they'll also be wowed by other stuff too, right? So again, I think about that risk versus reward. And when those injuries do happen, finding the other way to train where it's more of a collaborative effort between you and your body, and like complete celebration over things like, oh my gosh, I was able to tie my shoes without losing my breath today. Like, whoa, that's amazing. I'm doing really good with these small but very mighty improvements towards where I want to be, where my body knows it wants to be, and I know I want to be there with it. And so it becomes that more collaborative versus, like you were saying, we quiet the body down as be quiet and do as I say. I want to do this, and you're going to do it by whichever means necessary. And it's so good to us if you think about it that way too. It's like, okay, whatever you need, we'll get it done. Right? So then you end up lifting a super heavy weight in a way that maybe wasn't structurally sound. And the body maybe told you that. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe it was, just that whisper in your lower back or something that says, hey, I don't know about this, and we say, just do it anyways. And it goes, okay, we'll do it. Right. And it does it as best it can until something happens. So listening again to those whispers is one way to avoid it. But then on the other hand, prehab, so much prehab, that should be a part of people's training, not rehab. Let's hopefully not get to that point. If you have an injury, yes, absolutely rehab. But if we prehab more, then we might be able to rehab less, right? If we collaborate versus have like that, I don't know if it's a bad thing to say the glory mentality, right? Because there's so much glory in, again, being able to raise your arm up overhead without shoulder pain, or to be able to pick up something without having any communication whatsoever from any part of your body in a negative way. That's a huge win. And so if we could even think about training differently, not training for PRs, but training for the mechanics that are necessary in order to lift the absolute best quality as possible with the lightest weight as possible in order to get to your PR. That makes sense. So that's kind of how I've had to change my way of thinking about it. And injuries really are our best teachers, because they ground us. It's like, hey, you have to think about what you did, and then how you can improve it for next time and hopefully avoid it. I have seen a lot of people go through injuries, and incredible amounts of them have gotten through it and back into their sports and back into their their love, of movement. So the body's a remarkable thing. We just have to be better team players, I guess.
No, I think that's great. And so much of what you said there is true. I would say like 90% of my injuries have probably come from ego, where I am just like pushing myself too hard and not listening to like my body at all and yelling at it, you will do this. And then I end up injuring myself.
Dang it. I mean, it did it, so that's good, but yeah.
But to what cost? Because then you end up like stepping back, like 10 steps and having to rework through everything just to get to the same spot you were beforehand.
Yep. Exactly. And then you have these other things to work through, like mental blocks or, these other fear things that'll pop up when you're lifting that will change the way that you're moving merely because of that. So then you have to almost, dare I say, reprogram that whole system in an entirely new way of thinking and moving through that intentional thought or intentional moving.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, definitely there's a lot of fear after like going through a big injury, and it definitely changes kind of the way that you're doing things and stuff. So yeah, that makes so much sense. On the other side of that, we've kind of talked about those high-end athletes. What about somebody on the other side where they're very minimal movement right now, whether that's, they're just in an office job all day, they don't really have time to get out and do things like this, or they're like living with a chronic illness where maybe they're not able to get as much movement in as possible. How do you suggest they start getting some small increments of movement in, and what would that look like?
So that is a really tough question, merely because of the broad spectrum of all the things that could look like, right? Or people feeling within those circumstances. If you are in bed, you can still move your hips from posterior to anterior. You can assist with your arms to pull one leg up and into a bent position, right? Understanding how to use, people say core muscles, that there's, in my mind, a core muscular structure is an entire system of small, slow twitch muscles that surround the bones and support them through movement. So we've got our big type 2 muscles that a lot of people think about, your six-pack abs, your shoulder caps, your delts, your back straps, lats, things like that. But not very many people think about the rotator cuff or the hip flexors or each of the small little muscles that link each vertebrae together. You know what I mean? So there's all of these little slow twitch muscles that can be trained laying down, thinking about squeezing your abs. Oh, this is going to be kind of hard to explain over a podcast. We'll see if I can do it. The best way I can describe it, and I've told you this before, Kyrie, is thinking about walking into cold water about chest deep, right? Freezing cold water, like the coldest water ever, and what your stomach muscles do to get away from that cold, right? They tighten and they lift. Practicing that while you're moving your leg, in bed, holding that muscle, assisting the leg up, sitting at the edge of a chair and squeezing that muscle before you stand up, right? Every time you stand up from your desk or getting out of bed or getting up to go get a snack, whatever it is, think about holding that muscle first. Breathing cold water. Don't forget to breathe though, because when you're cold, you forget to breathe. Hold your breath. Activate that muscle, then move. By doing that, you're actually training your body to be more supported and more held every time you move or change positions. We tend to sink into gravity instead of hold ourselves upright against gravity, right? So somebody that doesn't have the ability to go to a gym or go do sport, that would be the best thing to start with, is activate that muscle, hold yourself upright, and practice that for just a couple of minutes at a time. Does not have to be 30 minutes at a time or an hour set. It's just every time you can think about it, activate that muscle. right? That's a great start to that core foundational training that's needed to hopefully improve a situation that, maybe you can't get up during your day or something like that. That will at least give your muscles some sort of stimulation, that it can at least give you that support needed for a long day of sitting. Changing the hip tilt, like we were talking about before, every couple of minutes, making sure you're not just sitting in one stagnant position into gravity, where gravity's kind of putting a lot of stress on the connective tissues and those slow twitch muscle groups. Type 1 muscles is what I know them to be. We want to make sure that's as strong as possible. And those are also the muscles that are trained during prehab as well. So those are your supportive bone structure type of muscles. So the guys on top, the big guys, the heavy guys that lift a lot of weight, don't crush everything on the inside, right?
That makes sense. I love that you talk about like that mind body connection and like doing it so intentionally. So thinking about each of those muscles that you're trying to activate in whatever the movement is that you're doing. And I see that a lot with like weightlifting. Like if you're doing bodybuilding, they always talk about like focusing on which muscle it is that you're trying to work with whatever movement it is, and how just putting that intentionality into making that mind body connection actually creates better movement for you through it.
And actually, I love that you brought that up because with weightlifting, they something that I went through anyways when I did weightlifting. I've done bodybuilding competitions, not many. That's a really hard thing. It was not my world. It's a really hard thing.
Yeah.
To everybody that can do that. The isolation part was something that kind of confused me as well. And it was cleared up a little bit once I learned about kinetic movement. So calisthenics and kinetic movement, for anybody that's interested, whether you feel like you can participate or if you're just interested in how it works, it's really good to know that type of movement because it's all connected, right? Kinetic movement through fascial tissue. If anybody's familiar with fascia, it really runs through every fiber of your body, every muscle, every connective tissue, every organ. It's everywhere and it connects us into one unit, right? So if I'm isolating one side, I should also be activating on the opposite side all the way down through the floor. So not just anchoring into the shoulder or the elbow if I'm doing arm work, but actually anchoring everything into your solid foundation of your trunk is what I'll call like, your torso area. Anchor it into the trunk and pull it all the way down into the floor so that your entire body is actually working to lift that weight versus just your arm by itself. Right. So learning that the whole sense of movement has to happen from the entire body really, really enhances your experience as a mover, I feel, in my opinion. It did for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so interesting. Sometimes when you have pain in one area, it's actually connected to like a tightness or something in a totally different area of your body. I think you were helping my mom with one thing that she had some pain going on, and you were like, well, like adjust this, do this, and she's like, but that's not even like that doesn't have anything to do with what I'm telling you is going on. And you're like, no, just do it. And she was like, and I feel so much better.
Yep. It's really incredible. If you think about the demonstration, I don't know if I showed you, if you gather the bottom right corner of your shirt, let's say, and see what it does to the upper left corner of your shirt, it'll pull all the way from that side, right? If you just kind of grab it in your hand, it'll tense all the way up to your shoulder from there. So that's kind of how it works in that sense as well. And that if she has the shoulder injury, it could be stemming from her opposite hip, or it could be the same hip. So you kind of have to, gauge how the tension is pulling the bones and how the body is communicating the pain, right? She would tell me, oh, it's starting here, but it kind of travels this way, right? So I try to look at her and decide, okay, well, where could it be pulling from if that's where the tension is starting to occur, right? So yeah, it's very interesting to think about. It's my favorite thing. It's just like a giant puzzle, just putting all these gears and pieces together, and just like any machine, if your gears aren't lined up correctly, you're going to grind them,
Yeah.
you set those gears right, they work great. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we try to get back into, again, intelligent moving before you work with the ego stuff, because then when you're ready to just push that PR, like, do that incredible circus trick that doesn't look human, you're good to go, because you and your
Mhm.
body have such a good relationship and you're communicating so well that you will stop any injury way before it happens,
Mhm.
or at least walk out with a mild tweak or
Yeah.
slight
Something
tear.
something a lot less than it would have been.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that's so important to say is like before we're just like jumping straight into things, we need to have that connection with our body. I've learned for me, like, as much as I love weightlifting and it's so good, one of the best things that I do is like yoga. I do yoga sometimes, and just like that mind body connection and just like feeling the flow through my body and being able to stretch and move and things helps me in my weightlifting as I go into that because I have much more body awareness and that connection that we're talking about. So I
Yeah.
think if you're doing like a heavy sport or something like that, you should also have something where you're just like more meditatively, I guess, kind of connecting to your body in some way.
Yep, absolutely. And, that goes back to just your discussion of people that can't do these intense sports, or maybe just aren't interested in these intense sports, um, having that intentional connection to slowing yourself down and sitting on the floor more, maybe going barefoot more and
Mm,
doing what feels good to you, within reason. Because I just went back and said that comfort is where we're getting hurt, right? A lot of times that is where it's happening. But you can find comfort in movement when you start to tell your body that it's safe. A lot of times pain happens because the body's trying to signal danger. You know, um, Sitting on the floor hurts me, right? That's what I hear a lot of people say. Uh, then I ask how many times they sit on the floor, and most of the time they say, not at all. So the body signals to them, oh, this is new. This might be dangerous. I'm not sure I like it down here. It's not as comfortable as up there. We shouldn't do this.
mm,
Right. So that's the negotiation factor and collaborative effort of, but does it really hurt? Or are we just not used to like a harder surface that we have to sit on, and
mhm,
push against and actually lift ourselves up against gravity? Because if you sit on the floor with gravity, it does kind of hurt,
mhm,
so the more you sit on the floor, you learn how to hold yourself up, right? And that can be, within that intentional movement, that can be enough. You don't have to do all this other stuff and, go big or go home, or any of that if you don't want to, right? I mean, like you said, that it's all about that intention and collaborative effort, and everything else, whatever you want to do with your body, in my experience, in my opinion, gets so much better. It's
mm.
just very, very joyous way to be.
Oh, I love that so much. So, as you've gone through your own journey of like going through the circus arts and kind of getting to know your body at a deeper level, how has it impacted your daily living?
Well, actually, it has been a complete life changer for me. Going from, like I was talking about, a great bench warmer, to being able to do these positions that quite honestly used to make me sick, because I would look at these contortionists and just be like, no, no way, that's human. Like, oh, I can't watch that. And and now I'm doing the same things, but actually more so than what used to make me feel about it. And that was my body's way of empathizing. Like, if I did that,
I
that
would die.
like I was dying. Yeah, you know. So why did they do it with such ease, and they can breathe and talk? What the heck? And never in a million years did I think that I would be as flexible or as strong as I am right now. And people call me coordinated and graceful, believe it or not. Um, and
Not the draft you were once before.
yeah, not the baby giraffe. And Lerp was also amongst my list of names. It was great. Middle school is awesome. So, so yeah, I mean, as far as life-changing experience for me to, for one, look at any obstacle and be like, oh, I want to go on a hike. I can do that. I know my body well enough. If my ankle starts to roll even a little bit, my body can correct it. My feet will take over. They know what to do. If I want to go rock climbing, if I want to ski, if I want to ice skate, if I want to do anything that I'm interested in, I have the ability to calculate and minimize my risk for the most part, right? There's also these things that can happen, but for the most part, that's where I'm at. I actually fell on the ice yesterday. And I did the whoop, 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 feet sliding out and then fell
The
backwards.
cartoon character running
Exactly.
on
Arms
ice.
flailing, absolutely. And I fell hard, but my body knew where to hit, how to roll from any angle because I've practiced that so many times that I walked away with a tiny little sore hand, and today it's perfectly fine. So my students, I teach them how to fall. I have students that are very high risk when it comes to falling and have fallen a few times, but it was done perfectly. Right? So they didn't get injured. It may be just a bump and a bruise, but nothing more than that. So as far as life changing, it's changed my life, it's changed my students' life, it's affected the way that I think. When I get into these bouts of just feeling gross and antsy and anxious, being able to just go and move in a way that feels so good that it just kind of separates me from all the rest of the stuff for that moment so I can think more logically. The brain body soul connection is very real. And if one of them is off, you got to bring them back. And a lot of times I found that movement is very healing in that sense. I've been through some pretty incredibly difficult situations in my life, both mentally and recently physically. When my significant other went through a terribly disabling experience for about a year. To the point of where I had to physically lift him out of bed and put him in his wheelchair and get him around for that whole year. And if I didn't have the understanding that I do about lifting and keeping myself safe, I mean, he's 6'5", I'm 5'10", and he's about 200 pounds. So that's not any caregivers out there, like shout out to you guys. Like it was a totally life-altering event. And if I didn't have the knowledge that I do, I could have very easily hurt myself as well, trying to get him where he needed to be, so he got the care that he needed. I had the mental break that I needed through my movement, but also understanding how to help him in the process. I mean, it's just, I am a very strong advocate for getting people to move better and to feel good in their own bodies. So yes, very, very life-changing.
I love that so much. And yes, I 100% agree. After fighting depression and, all of those things for a really long time and going through major trauma, like weightlifting was my escape from that. It gave me that serotonin boost. It gave me, like I got to feel strong physically, which helped me feel strong mentally. There's a lot to that. And yeah, you as a caretaker, I can imagine taking care of a 6'5", 200-pound man. But I am like so impressed with you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So has he been doing better, and has he been trying to like start movement again? And if so, how has that been for you guys as you're working through that?
Well, he was diagnosed with stage 4 rheumatoid arthritis. And what a nasty thing.
Yeah.
There's no cure for it. There's not much we can do for it except,
And you guys are so young.
I know. It's terrible. And I know so many people that have this, and my heart goes out to you guys. He's on all sorts of medications right now, which stabilize him, but he still has his days, that are not as great, but we're very grateful that he's no longer I mean, completely dependent. He's definitely more independent now, not as much as he'd like to be, but
Of
enough.
course. Yeah.
Um,
It's never gonna happen fast enough, but
no, it won't. And he won't make 100% recovery. I don't think. We're hopeful. I mean, that's all you can be, is hopeful, but also realistic.
yeah.
But he has started to implement a lot more of just the things we had talked about, internal shoulder rotation is prominent as well. And that tends to put a lot of pressure on the shoulder joints and create some stress of the rotator cuff. So, he's thinking more about external rotation of the shoulders. He's an artist, so
Mm,
rounding over and doing artwork and things like that all
yeah.
day. He breaks, he's stretching more often, things like that, listening to his body more. So yes, he is finally implementing these things.
After I'm sure you've been bugging him
Right.
about it for years,
Yeah.
and
Oh
now
yeah.
his body was forced.
Yep.
Like we were talking about, his body said you're
Yep.
done.
Exactly. Listen to her now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It was just in my favor, I guess.
Yeah. You're like, see, I told you so.
Yeah. At his unfortunate expense, but
Yeah, right.
now he knows, I guess. So yeah, that has been helping a lot. So
Mm,
yeah, or even those with the chronic pain and things that you had said, there's things you can do. And it doesn't have to be your, lunge and squat and pull up and push up. It can be something as simple as learning how to sit upright with gravity from the edge of your chair, just
mhm.
starting there and working your way out from there. So
I love that. Well, any final tips, tricks, tools, anything like that for the people out there that are like, okay, I have some level of like, athletic ability, whatever that looks like for them, but I want to be more intentional in it so that I'm not causing injury or, suffering because of it later in life.
tips and tricks. I would have to say the more internal you can be when you're externally focused, the better off you'll be. If you've got
That's a good
that
way to say it.
report you got to do and you're glued to the computer and your neck starts to hurt, stop and go internally and see what you're doing to make that pain happen and reverse it and see if you can make it go away. Like your head is dropping too far, pull it back and glide it back over your shoulders a little bit.
Mm,
Shoulders are starting to hurt. Check to see if your elbows are facing out to the sides or if they're tight against your body. Middle back is hurting. See if your back is rounded or if you're sitting more in extreme arch position the other way, right? Try and find the middle between those 2 points. See if that makes you feel better. Again, lower back pain, tailbone, things like that. Check your hip tilt, right? Hip tilt has a lot to do with where your back is going to be placed. So going through all of these links, femur, feet, what is everything doing? So take a moment, pause, stop, look at it, reverse it. If it doesn't help, there's more you can do, but that usually does the trick. So
So it's not even like necessarily like stretches or anything like that. It's just more intentional in the way that you're sitting or the way that you're moving or whatever.
absolutely. I think that's your foundation. And then everything that branches off of that foundation is kind of I call it the and then, right, of that. So once you learn how those body postures affect you and how to make them better, then when you do your sport or you do your stretches or something like that, and those same things pop up, you get that same ache in your knee, you get that same pinch in your hip, you can then stop and pause and go, oh, I remember when I was adjusting it, when I was sitting in the chair and my knee was falling way too far in and I got that pinch on the outside of my hip. Maybe this is the same thing.
Yeah.
And you can learn to adjust it from there too. So it will improve all the things that you're already doing from that foundational movement. And yes, of course, there's a lot of other things that can be done, but without extreme overwhelm, because I feel like that happens to a lot of people too, especially January 1st. It's the time to do it all, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to get overwhelmed when you don't accomplish the things that you really, really want to do, and you're very passionate and ready to go. And then you miss that one day of working out, and then it starts to spiral down. And then you've got the shame and the guilt and all this other stuff that might spiral into something else. And then it's just like, oh, this isn't healthy. This isn't what we're supposed to feel like when we're trying to get healthy, right? So setting the intention of every day, I'm just going to listen a little bit more. That's a very obtainable goal. Whether you do anything or not from it, just listening is a great start.
Yep.
And then you'll start to listen, you'll get in the habit of listening, and then you can start responding little bits at a time, which then turn into a lot more great, late night conversations with your body
Yeah.
about all the things that you messed up that is going to get better.
Yeah. No, I definitely have noticed that as I have been uh like I said, asking myself every day what my body needs from me. I've recognized that I've go of a lot of the guilt and shame that comes from when my body says, "Hey, you need to slow down, you need to change things, you need to whatever," because I'm being more intentional with that. So last week I got really sick. I had a really bad cold, and I go to the gym, every day, typically, 5 to 7 days a week I'm at the gym. And before, I think, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, if I had not gone to the gym that day, I would have beat myself up about it. I would have been so mad at myself and been like, "Well, why can't you do this? You do this every day. What is going to happen today that's so bad?" And I just would have been putting that shame on myself. And now that I'm listening to my body, I'm like, "Okay, I'm sick. That's my body telling me I need to slow down. I need to chill out for a few days. I need to get some rest. I need to just cuddle at home for a day or two." And I did not feel nearly as bad about missing out on, things because I have put that practice into my daily schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it.
Love it. Beautiful. Okay, so where can we find you? What things do you have going on? Tell us all the things.
So you can find me at www.starvalleycircus.com. You can schedule a private lesson, do consultation. I also teach circus classes here out in Star Valley. If you're ever in the area, come on down, join the circus for the moment. It's a great place.
It's so fun. I love it.
Well, hopefully we'll catch you next time, but no pressure. I understand you've got a lot going on when you're here. Also, nonprofit organization that I am assisting develop. I'll be the new executive director for the Wyoming Arts Development Institute, and we will be doing arts education and career development. So this can kind of branch into anybody that's interested in learning more about the way that I move or anything like that. I'll have my certification done soon, hopefully, so I can train other trainers. I've trained dozens successfully with my previous certification. This one will be hopefully even better. So people will be confident in their teaching of movement and their own movement practice, in addition to the arts. So any type of arts educators or arts practitioners, anybody interested in taking classes or whatever, please get a hold of me and let's make it happen, especially here in Wyoming. That's where I'm at. So
Cool. Awesome. And you're on Instagram. What are you, Jen Circus?
at Jennifer's Circus. Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. Well, go check her out. She's awesome. She's always doing fun things. So thank you so much for coming on, Jen. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for coming to this week's episode of The Confident Mompreneur. If you loved today's episode, let us know, share to your stories and tag us, send to your friends, give us a rating, all of the things, and make sure to check out our guests and follow them on all of the links that we listed above. If you're looking for me, you can always find me at The Confident Mompreneur, and you can also check it out, www.theconfidentpost.com, for a blog relating to today's episode. I am so happy you're here, and I hope to see you again next week.